Hi, and welcome to this talk about a social science perspective on artificial intelligence. AI is a super current topic. This is both in terms of that it is very trendy to research it now, there's a hype, and also because there's lots of exciting developments happening in AI. But these things also make AI a pressing societal issue for a number of reasons. It's important to look at how we think of it, how we are affected by AI, and how we develop it and with which aims. We must work together as researchers across disciplines and faculties to understand the complex phenomenon of AI. Let me start by talking about boundary objects. In sociology, boundary objects are defined like this. Boundary objects are objects which are both plastic enough to adapt to local needs and constraints of the several parties employing them, yet robust enough to maintain a common identity across sites. And I argue that AI, at least that it's talked about now with the emerging broad research agenda around it, is indeed a boundary object. It is plastic and flexible as a word. Is AI just machine learning? Is it equal to algorithms? Is AI about efficient and correct diagnosis and solutions? Is it a synonym to computer science or even to computerization? Or is it about a broader political change that affects people's jobs, politics, democracy? Still, the word is robust enough for us to know approximately what we're talking about when we're talking about AI. But are we always talking about the same thing? Philosopher of science Thomas Kuhn famously talked about paradigmatic science as a form of puzzle solving, where scholars were sitting around a metaphorical table working on the same problem but making different contributions. But I don't think we're really there yet in AI research, especially not the interdisciplinary forms of it. Boundary objects are weakly structured in common use and become strongly structured in individual site use. They may be abstract or concrete. Yes, in some fields there is a very precise understanding of what AI is and what it does. But when we speak of AI in general and across scientific domains of expertise, it easily becomes abstract, because boundary objects have different meanings in different social worlds, but their structure is common enough to more than one world to make them recognizable. So the notion of boundary objects was coined in an article in the area of social studies of science, where the authors presented a case study of collaboration around a zoological museum in the US in the early 20th century. But the notion of boundary objects has a much broader validity. The first two sentences in the abstract to the original paper reads, "Scientific work is heterogeneous, requiring many different actors and viewpoints. It also requires cooperation." So why is it useful to think in terms of boundary objects? Well, I would say that because looking at complex phenomena, such as different aspects of our society, through the lens of a boundary object, such as AI, can help us understand how various areas of expertise can cooperate in knowledge production, even if we may have different understandings and sometimes even conflicting interests. So this talk is my contribution to this discussion from the perspective of a social scientist. But let's back up a bit. What is AI? How can this hot topic, as it were, be defined? It is all over the media, it is all over public discussions, but as I said earlier, views and definitions differ. For some, AI is about artificial life forms that can surpass human intelligence. For others, AI can refer to any kind of data processing technology, for example, different forms of pattern or image recognition. Our understanding of AI, as there is this ongoing hype, is quite nebulous. It's like it eats everything in its way. we start to label things as AI that we previously used other names for. And conversely, some of the things that we used to call AI are actually no longer called AI. I read about how 50 years ago, some automatic methods for search using computers were considered to belong to the area of AI. But now these methods are taught to basically every computer science student. And similarly, some things on the internet that we have long called search engines, they can definitely also be defined as AI technologies, if that's more fitting. Also, some of the methods that are developed today for processing uncertain information is becoming so well understood now that these methods may likely quite soon be moved from the area of AI to the area of statistics or probability. So, like so many other heavy words in society and culture, AI is what us sociologists call a floating signifier. The meaning of AI is never fully fixed. It's only temporarily fixed and under certain conditions in time and space. It's becoming a political concept. The confusion about the meaning of AI is also obviously made worse by all the visions of AI in science fiction and popular culture, and furthermore, defining AI is difficult because some of the things that seem easy to us humans are actually hard for a robot, such as picking up a pen in a so-called natural way. While what seems hard for us, such as beating a master chess player, can be relatively easy by comparison for a computer program. But returning now to the main question, what is the social science of AI? Let's begin with what it's not. It's not social AI. Social AI is a fascinating research field, but it is the focus of computer scientists and AI developers. Mostly, at least. Social AI is AI which is able to use social contexts and rules. It is about building AI tools that can capture clues in their environments as some form of input. So it is socially aware AI. But it is not social science by definition. It needs social science research to build socially acceptable solutions, however. It needs knowledge about social interaction, relationships of power, social rituals, and so on. So social AI could actually be a potential consumer of social science, but it's not in itself necessarily social science. So this is a great area for collaboration between AI people and social science people, whoever they may be. A buzzword these days is AI for social good. And this is of course an honorable goal, to build AI that makes the world a better place. But just because it has the word social in it, doesn't necessarily make it into social science. This is from a paper in Nature where the authors define goals for the AI for social good movement, as they call it. And as you see, most of these goals are about process and implementation. But there are also some words in here such as trust, inclusion, human rights, privacy, where social scientists can provide valuable input. But we must not confuse social AI, AI for social good, and these types of fields with social science. So, from the perspective of a social scientist, what is the problem with many of these perspectives? Well, it's technological determinism. We define technological determinism as the belief that technology in society can get universally predictable social consequences. So, to put it simple, it is the same thing as believing that we can construct a meeting room where all meetings function in the same way, a movie that will make everyone laugh, or a pencil that will make everyone write love letters. But one and the same technology, one and the same medium will always get different consequences. Technology historian Melvin Kranzberg famously wrote that technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. And he continued, By that I mean that technology's interaction with the social ecology is such that technical development frequently have environmental, social and human consequences that go far beyond the immediate purposes of the technical devices and practices themselves. And the technology can have quite different results when introduced into different contexts or under different circumstances. So what is this? Is it some form of relativism where we can never know anything about technology, so we might as well just quit? Well, no. What it tells us is that we cannot simply build, evaluate, secure, and implement technical solutions. We must keep the effects and repercussions of any given technology's interaction with the social ecology as an open empirical question. We must continually and critically analyze consequences of technologies such as AI in its different contexts and under different circumstances. Just think of social media. The same platforms, the same algorithms that brought us the power of Me Too and Black Lives Matter, the same kind of hashtag activism that contributed to the overthrowing of dictators, at least that's what some say, during the Arab Spring. They were the same kind of platforms and algorithms that won Trump the 2016 election, the same platforms and algorithms that have inspired mass shootings, that fuels hatred of minority groups and spreads disinformation. So it's not the technology that determines the social outcomes. What I believe in more is a perspective that is focused on the social shaping of technology, or rather a form of social constructionism, where technology and society mutually shape each other. Here's a very simple example. These recommendations are quote-unquote correct. The algorithm that produced them is quote-unquote smart. But the recommendations reproduce stereotypes. So what can the algorithm actually do about that? What should the algorithm do about that? And who is allowed to decide how to tweak the algorithm? More important questions are who gains from these recommendations? Who loses? And where does the solution lie to these things? May it even be beyond the technology as such? So what would a truly social science of AI entail? Well, for one, it can't be too involved in the actual creation of AI technologies. It should focus on AI's social dimensions. And by social, I mean societal, political, cultural. I'll present 3 building blocks. First, we must study the humans and the machines in context. The interaction between humans and machines is a sociocultural rather than a technological process. Social science research in AI must move past issues of mere usability, fairness, and responsibility, however important they are, towards a broader research framework that allows for posing more far-reaching and deeper-cutting questions. For example, questions of power, of ownership, exclusion, labor market consequences, laws, and discrimination. Second, we must see AI agents, the various implemented AI technologies, as social actors in a complex system alongside humans. When they enter the social domain, technologies don't really have any unique standing. Both humans and technologies, whether they be robot pill dispensers, facial recognition systems, search engine results, they are nodes in a network, a social network, together with humans that can produce unintended or unexpected outcomes. This is sort of the point of sociology, to study these things. And importantly, once again, they can get different consequences in different situations for different people. Finally, we must approach AI as a social construction in terms of the powerful buzzword that it has become today. It's important to study how AI is talked about, by whom, who defines the visions and goals, and what utopian hopes or dystopian fears are tied to AI. AI is indeed a socio-technical phenomenon that comes into being through how it's understood and politicized by actors with interests. So, summing up, what can we grasp in better ways if we adopt this type of approach? I have 4 points here and I'll take you through them. First, a social science perspective does not rely on AI always being the solution. For example, in healthcare, implementing AI, there may be problems relating to trust, accuracy, reassurance, human contact, privacy and security, and so on. So maybe then social science research can show if and when AI solutions are reasonable at all. AI may not always be the socially viable option. Second, this graph is a recent analysis I made of bots, automated user accounts on Twitter that were used in key discussions in the run-up to the very recent US election. And here the green dots are humans, the black dots are bots. These bots that largely work as tools for political disruption and propaganda, they are also AI solutions. But they are here adopted by activist groups, by individuals, as well as by organizations and politicians in ways that the mainstream view of AI as a form of progressive solution to societal problems misses out on. So a social science perspective will help here as it's more conducive to studying AI and automation, no matter who deploys it, no matter for which reasons. We can study both the good people and the bad people from the outside. Third, this is one more example of when AI goes wrong. So how do we solve these problems? This is a case of a UK passport photo recognition software. And should we take this information back to the developers to tell them, make this algorithm less racist? And when they succeed, the problem is solved. Is the problem ever solved? And if so, are algorithms that are more ethical or correct the solution to this problem? Or are they just a cover-up? It comes down to whether we are technological determinists or not. Can we solve the social problem with technology? Can we erase centuries of oppression with an algorithm? Or do we need sociology, history, philosophy, gender studies, critical race studies, social movement research, political science to go deep into these issues? So in terms of a division of labor in interdisciplinary AI research, I would say that for social scientists, AI should not be conceived as the product of the research. Social scientists don't produce AI. We approach AI as an object of research. AI as politics, AI in its social context, AI and the labor market, humans and machines in interaction, and so on. So looking at the field of AI research, some researchers, like this one, are focused on creating and producing AI based on technological considerations. Others, like this one, are studying AI completely from the outside, as an object, looking at social considerations. Then we may have other forms of research, such as, for example, here and here. And some of these ones, up in the left corner, sometimes take some more social considerations into account. And some of us down here in the right corner sometimes are a bit more savvy than others when it comes to how the technology works. But what we need to understand AI in full is a socio-technical perspective, where different areas of research work closely together in open collaboration, where each one does what they do best. So in such collaborations, the social science contribution can ideally be that it sees AI in its broader context, that it approaches AI from the outside, seeing it as a social structure that can be both enabling and limiting for humans, a perspective that is focused on interaction, and a perspective that is constructionist. What is AI made to mean? How is AI politicized? A perspective that scrutinizes power relations and looks at who are the winners, who are the losers, when and why.